Hello and welcome to my video on Paraphony and Polyphonic Aftertouch on the Arturia MicroFreak synthesizer. So let me start by giving an overview of what exactly the MicroFreak is. I would say it's a relatively unusual synthesizer for several reasons. First, it has a digital oscillator section, but the oscillator section is driven by a series of different algorithms. And each algorithm will produce a different type of sound. Each of those sound types can be shaped by one of three parameters that are available to you. This feeds into an analog filter and an analog VCA. There is a primary envelope and there is a secondary envelope. The secondary envelope can also be cycling. In addition, there is an LFO. I'm not going to go into details, but there is also an arpeggiator and a sequencer. One of the more interesting features or eye-catching elements of the synthesizer is its keybed. So this is a PCB keybed, which effectively measures the amount of contact area your finger makes with the individual key. This is used to infer both the amount of pressure that you're applying and the velocity with which you strike the key. Logically, it's just about surface area, and if the keyboard gets wet, it can start to react strangely. But it is a simple design, and it provides access to Polyphonic Aftertouch. So I'll begin by describing what Polyphonic Aftertouch is. Ordinarily, on a synthesizer or a keyboard, when you strike a key, one piece of information is provided, which has two parts. One of which is which note you've hit. The other thing is the velocity with which you struck that note. So that's basically how quickly the key went down. This mirrors the behavior of a piano, where a hammer is raised up to hit the string, and the amount of energy you put into the key determines how rapidly it raises up and how hard it hits the string. Some keyboards provide a release velocity, and for certain sounds that may be relevant whether you release the key quickly or slowly. Moderately common frequency is known as channel aftertouch. So what that means is, after the initial velocity, if you push down into a key, then another timbral change may occur. This is most common in monophonic synthesizers. In fact, in the base station video I didn't demonstrate the aftertouch, but it has channel aftertouch. And the reason why it works well for monophonic synthesizers is, irrespective of the number of keys you press down, there's only one note sounding at a given time. So applying pressure to that key doesn't matter, there's only one sound. If I was playing a chord, and I use channel aftertouch, if I press one key harder, all the sounds are going to respond to that. Now, there are various ways that this can be dealt with, one of which is used by the polybrute, where it allows you to say, I only want the channel aftertouch to apply to a certain note. Maybe that's the highest note that you're playing, maybe it's the lowest note you're playing, maybe it's the last note that you played, but it allows you to simulate the ability to apply this modulation to only one particular note. And a true polyphonic aftertouch keyboard, an example being the Hydrasync or the famous Yamaha CS80, allows each individual key to have a different amount of pressure applied, and the voice corresponding to that key to have that modulation applied to it. Various synthesizers support this. One of them I demonstrated previously is the Peak. Surprisingly, for a relatively small and low-cost device, the MicroFreak also supports Polyphonic Aftertouch. So the two things I want to do today are discuss what paraphony means and to demonstrate Polyphonic Aftertouch and why it may be of interest to you. So there's a patch already loaded on here, which is the last one that I saved. But I'm going to go to an init patch, so I know that my preset 1 is an init. So okay, so what we have here is one of the algorithms, by default what's called basic wave, which has a series of parameters. The output of this goes into this filter, which is a multi-mode, low-pass, bandpass, high-pass, 12 dB per octave filter with resonance. Then it goes into a VCA. The VCA is enveloped by this envelope. The filter may also be optionally enveloped by this envelope, and there is a second looping envelope and an LFO. The routings and modulations can all be configured via this mod matrix, which again, for a relatively low-cost synthesizer, is quite unusual. Looking at this, we see we have a source, which are the rows, cycling envelope, LFO, press, meaning pressure, and key R. So key means which note on the keyboard you play. So the higher the note on the keyboard, the higher the value of this parameter. Press is pressure. But more importantly, there are actually two possibilities for this. So when I see press mode, it tells me that currently the pressure mode is aftertouch. The pressure mode may also be velocity. So in other words, we can, in this modulation row, make parameters affected by the initial velocity of the key we strike, or they may be affected by the aftertouch that we apply. So in this case, aftertouch is what we really want. Note that even when you're using aftertouch, you have the option to adjust the velocity amp mod. So this is to say how loud or quiet an individual note will be based on the velocity. So in other words, in setting this, have access to velocity. I mentioned that the way the keyboard works really relates to the amount of contact you make with the key. So striking it harder does make it louder, but also striking with the tip of my finger versus the pad of my finger significantly adjusts the volume. So there's definitely a technique involved in playing this. Now, as I said, each of the oscillator types, we have a range of different parameters. Let me see what I'm going to go for. Let's say we're going to use the wavetable oscillator type. At the moment, the filter is open. This first knob will adjust the first parameter on the display, which is which of the wavetables I'm using. So there are 16. I like the sound of this 15th one. Let's try using the next knob, which is the position in the wavetable. It gets quite buzzy towards the middle. I might try a different wave. Okay, let's go for this one. And the final parameter is a chorus. Chorus is a little odd on this synthesizer because this is a mono output. It is not a stereo output synthesizer. So chorus is not applied in stereo. It's a monophonic chorus. In any case, I've chosen a wave. I've chosen a timbre or a position in that wavetable. So let's now look at how we route Polyphonic Aftertouch to a parameter. So I have the timbre position, say it's here. Okay, so I can hear that it gets brighter as the value increases. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look pressure to timbre. So I rotate this dial. The light at the intersection of pressure and timbre is flashing. I press down, these are mostly encoders. I'm going to turn it up. So notice as I increase the amount of surface contact that I make with the key, the timbre is changing. At the moment, you could say that this is like channel aftertouch because the keyboard is playing monophonically. What we can do now is we can move into a mode called paraphonic mode, and this is one of the subjects that I wanted to discuss. It's done on this synthesizer by simply pressing the paraphonic button. Now, confusingly, this is a one oscillator synthesizer, but in paraphonic mode, it can make 4 instances of that. And each of those 4 will only sound when a note is pressed. So notice how it got louder as I added keys to it. A traditional paraphonic synthesizer will have as many oscillators as there are paraphonic parts, and conventionally they will all play. There are a set of synthesizers, I think this was first done by the Korg Monopoly, which have the capacity to gate the oscillators corresponding to notes you're not yet using. The paraphonic synthesizers that Behringer have been releasing have added a similar feature, which I think they call auto damp, which effectively does the same thing. So it means that when I play multiple oscillators, multiple notes, they will come in and out. But on those synthesizers that I described, it is nothing more than a gate. These things simply open and close. Okay, so now we know that there are oscillators. Let's think about where those oscillators are going. The oscillators are feeding into a filter. This synthesizer is monophonic. It only has one filter. So that means the filter will equally affect all of the notes that are being played. Similarly, this synthesizer only has one VCA, and that VCA will impact all of the oscillators that are being played, and that is what paraphony is. So let me step back and explain. To me, polyphonic means a synthesizer on which you can play more than one note. So in that regard, this is a polyphonic synthesizer. But in more general use, polyphonic does not just mean able to play more than one note. Typically, it means that there are as many distinct voices as there are notes you are able to play. So by a voice in a subtractive synth, I mean one or more oscillator, a filter, an amplifier, and corresponding envelope generators, and possibly things like LFOs. What this means is that each note that I play can be fully articulated in terms of its amplitude and timbre, irrespective of any other notes that I'm playing. So that is a full voice. You can think of each voice on a polyphonic synthesizer in that sense as a monosynth. A paraphonic synthesizer does not have distinct voices. It has one voice with multiple oscillators and a way of tuning the oscillators by playing the keyboard. Now, paraphonic means that the individual sounds share some components of the voice architecture. On most synthesizers that are paraphonic, they share both the VCA and its envelope and the filter and its envelope. So what this means is every time any note wants to articulate, all notes that are playing will have that articulation applied. This is quite an unusual synthesizer in this regard. Why? It only has a single VCA, but that VCA is configured to stay open as long as we have a note held down. So you think, okay, nothing abnormal about that. But the digital oscillators have an interesting feature, which is they have the capacity to envelope themselves as they play. So let me illustrate this. I'm going to dial in an envelope shape, a little bit of attack, longer decay. Okay. Let's make some more attack so that's a bit more obvious. So I hope you can hear there that the envelope shape that I just defined for the VCA is actually happening for every note that I play. So even though technically there is not a voltage controlled amplifier per oscillator, the oscillators themselves have the capacity to simulate the behavior of an envelope. So all of them go through a master envelope, master VCA which stays open, and they envelope themselves within that. So that gives us the appearance of having separately articulated voices. This is very convenient, but this is a paraphonic synthesizer. How can we hear that it's paraphonic? Where will that present itself? Well, though the oscillators can simulate an amplitude contour, there is only one filter. So if we utilize that filter, similarly only one LFO, one cycling envelope, if we utilize that, then we will hear that there is only one, irrespective of the number of voices we play. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the filter amount, this is how much this envelope affects this filter. I'm going to close the filter significantly. I'll turn the resonance down a bit. So there maybe. So I don't know if you can hear, but the envelope as it applies to the filter is being repeated every time I add a note. Why is that happening? Well, because there is only one filter. There is no possibility to individually envelope the filter sounds for each one of these sounds that I'm making. Similarly, if I apply the LFO to the filter, then that will apply equally to all of the voices. So hopefully that discusses paraphony. Now I'd like to jump back to the other thing that I wanted to talk about. I'm going to turn this filter modulation off, is Polyphonic Aftertouch. So let me open the filter fully for now. Okay, so hopefully you can hear when I press two notes, I have the capacity to change the timbre of them independently of each other. This is what Polyphonic Aftertouch is. It's the capacity to modulate one of the notes that the synthesizer is playing without modulating all of them. Let me change the shape of this a little bit into something maybe a bit more pad-like. There's a wavetable I like a bit more here. So I quite like that wavetable. At the moment it's a bit harsh, probably because the modulation amount is a bit excessive. So I'm going to go back to this modulation that I was adjusting. Okay, I think that works quite well. Now, even though there is only one filter, there's nothing to say that I can't utilize that filter to some subtle degree without the paraphony becoming very obvious. Rather than using this envelope, either free running or in looping mode, I'm going to run this second oscillator as a second envelope as a regular envelope. The way that I can listen to its parameters quite straightforwardly is if I route it to pitch. So this is going to sound quite strange. So you could hear that movement there. So I'm going to adjust the... What I'm trying to do is to get a feel for what the shape sounds like. So I think that works for me. I quite like the shape that I've achieved, so I'm going to go to my pitch modulation slot, and now what I want to do is have the filter cutoff be modulated by this. So first I'm going to close the filter. Now I'm going to send some amount of the cycling envelope to the filter cutoff. And a little bit, make this a little bit. So notice, as I'm pressing notes, you can hear the envelope re-triggering. This is the paraphonic nature of the synthesizer when we modulate the filter. So I'm going to decrease the amount that we're modulating the filter here to make that effect slightly less pronounced. So this is the wavetable algorithm. I'm going to jump to some of the other algorithms and see if there's anything that might be interesting here. Maybe wave shaper. So the parameters are, first one is the wave, second one is the shaping amount, and the third one is the degree of asymmetry. So let's say that rather than changing the timbre parameter, I would like this asymmetry parameter to be changed. Well, you may note that asymmetry is not, or rather shape, is not in one of the columns. Luckily, I can press assign, turn a knob, and now assignable parameter 1 corresponds to shape. So what am I going to do with this? I have my cutoff amount set corresponding to this envelope. I'm going to go and find the timbral amount. I'm going to decrease this significantly. I'm going to leave a little of it just for interest, and then I'm going to turn up the degree to which asymmetry is affected by the Polyphonic Aftertouch. So let's play chords. Okay, so hopefully that illustrated a little bit about what it means for the MicroFreak to be a paraphonic synthesizer, and hopefully how that paraphony differs significantly from other paraphonic synthesizers you may have experienced. Additionally, I hope I've illustrated how Polyphonic Aftertouch works. I can say that Polyphonic Aftertouch on this keyboard is not as easy to operate as Polyphonic Aftertouch on a more traditional keyboard. But it is usable, and this is a very low-cost device. As for whether this is a really suitable synthesizer for a beginner, I would say the nature of the digital oscillators and the different algorithms is atypical for a subtractive synth. So whether or not that suits you is one question. Another is the paraphonic nature of the synthesizer. When you are not modulating the filter in response to keys being pressed, it behaves much closer to a traditionally polyphonic synthesizer than what you would think of as a paraphonic synthesizer. So you may discover that it sets false expectations for you about what it means to play a paraphonic synth, and you may find yourself disappointed by other paraphonic synths. In any case, I hope this was useful. I hope this gives you a better flavor for the MicroFreak, and I hope to see you again. Goodbye.